everyone, and welcome to the Spark Festival Showcase panel. As we have gone virtual this year, we are able to welcome people from far and wide, not just the Sydney locals. So we are delighted to have you all here with us this evening. For the next 50 minutes, we are going to talk about and learn more about the journey of three founders raising capital with the Sydney Angels. So whether you are a founder or an investor, there will be something to learn tonight. Let me first introduce the panel. We have Enrico Massi here with me. He's from the Sydney Angels, and so am I. I'm Karen Farley, and we will be the co-hosts. And then here we have our three founders. We have Caroline Naylor, who's from the Footprint Company. We have George Hartley, who's from Smartermail. And we have David Monaghan from Bandicoot Imaging. So these three founders are on very different, amazing journeys. So we'll be able to learn more about their companies and also how they raised capital with the Sydney Angels. So before we dive into that, just a couple of housekeeping points. First of all, we will be having a Q&A in the last half of the discussion. So while you're watching the presentations and listening to the discussion, if you think of any questions, please send them in to us because they take a little while to get to us and we would like to answer as many questions as we can. And the other thing is we will be running a poll as well. So this is the audience participation part of the panel discussion. And so there'll be three poll questions and we invite you to participate in that as well because that really helps us find out who is all there and tonight and also just good data for us moving forward. So the first thing we are going to do is Enrico is going to tell us a little bit more about the Sydney Angels. So over to you, Enrico.
Thank you, Karen, and welcome everyone. Just going to give you a little bit of an update just in terms of Sydney Angels. Obviously, we're very pleased to be here tonight with this panel of companies that we have actually funded. So just a little bit of an update. Sydney Angels is an angel investor membership organization. We were established back in 2008. At the moment, we have over 85 angel investor members. And what we do is we have a team-based investment process. That means that we're quite disciplined, consistent, and rigorous in basically assessing startups that actually apply for capital to us. We also benefit from having a sidecar fund as well that will co-invest with members, Sydney Angel members overall. Now, typically what we do is we invest in startups that raise their first post-family and friends round. So this could be anything from $200,000 to $600,000, and often we have some co-investors as well. Now, since inception, we have invested about $29 million, and this has effectively catalyzed 10 times that. So it's about $330 million into 73 startups, and that obviously means that we have obviously helped see these startups that later on have actually been able to raise more funding overall. So that's something which is actually we're very proud of. Our investment process cycle is 6 times a year, and we normally end up with about 6 to 8 new investments per year. Obviously, that's not a limited thing, and we can give you more information about that. But we do have, as I mentioned before, quite a rigorous process in terms of going through and everything. And I'm sure that the panel, our guests today, will be able to basically elaborate a little bit on that if you have any questions on that. We have invested in a range of about 73 different startups, all types of companies, all types of organizations. And a lot of these have actually been very, very successful. And as I mentioned before, our 3 panelists today are actually part of that cohort as well. So I will hand it back on to Karen now.
Okay, thanks, Enrico. So now we're going to hear from our founders. We'll start with Caroline Naylor, I do apologise, from the Footprint Company. And if you'd like to just tell us a little bit more about what the problem is that your company is solving and the solution, and just take 5 minutes to give us some insight into the Footprint Company, that'd be great. Thanks, Caroline.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Enrico, as well. I did have some slides, but I'm thinking that my little clicker is telling me it's disabled, so I might just wing it here. So, Footprint Company, we're property sector focused, and I guess you'd call us a clean tech type business, software as a service. And our core purpose is about radically reducing the materials carbon footprint of buildings. We actually do this by essentially curating very disparate data and then delivering that to our users, who are visual designers, in what we call design-ready information. So idea of it is that we are essentially in an environment of fragmented, exceptionally time-poor professionals, in a very scattered and confusing data environment. And our big issue is that the building sector contributes almost half of the total carbon footprint of humanity each year. Buildings and the formation of materials are a key challenge. Within the next 20 years, we have to essentially reduce the embodied carbon footprint of buildings and materials by 75%. And we have a background environment of our designers who are operational in the environment, who don't have a background education on this particular point. And the other challenge we have from a time point of view is that most large major buildings take 3 to 5 years between the time they're thought of and the time that they're delivered. So if you think about our time horizon of 20 years, we've already lost the first few. So we're up against it. The company I founded in 2013 actually brought it out of a corporate company in Australia. And when I founded that, I had aspirations that we would make a very big difference in the world, but I hadn't imagined that we would grow to be able to have over 300 million square metres of buildings and information applied to, and the carbon footprint emissions that we've actually estimated to have saved through our projects and through our designers are equal to 1 whole year of the whole of Australia's household carbon footprint. So we're sort of continuing to count that. So the impact is good, but it's not what we really need so far. So our technology is really, as I said, it's about trying to basically curate a very disparate, data-heavy environment of information and bring that together into a more visual presentation to designers who are wanting to make the decision at the point of design through their workflows. And so what we do, we obviously leverage the internet and our data technology to be able to do that. The other thing about our products is that the traditional cost of doing this is very high, and generally it has been limited to the sort of what you'd call the elite building projects. And what we're really seeking to attempt to do is make that far more accessible. If you sort of think about Henry Ford's words of creating the big middle ground of actually enabling the masses to be able to access these things cheaper, easier, with a greater impact, then that's very much about what we are all about. In terms of my
thanks so much for... Oh, sorry, Caroline, keep going. I do apologise.
Sorry. I'm a quantity surveyor by background, so I love counting things. So this particular vision of mine coming to the business is very much core of what we do. And plus I love buildings. So I really appreciate the time and the Angels' investment in our business. Thank you.
So thanks, Caroline. We will be chatting a little bit more about the fundraising journey with you in the Q&A later, but I was just going to, it's a big problem that you're trying to solve. I know we're all concerned with it, about it, and so is Bill Gates, as the video on your website. But one of the questions I was just going to ask you is, you're going to democratize carbon information for properties. I mean, how do you sell this idea to customers and to investors?
Thanks, Karen. To be honest, I guess we have now an environment around us, a marketplace around us, where people are understanding that there is such a problem. To be honest, it's a luxury we have right now. 12 months ago, when embodied carbon was just a thing that was really nice to have, nobody knew they had the problem, then the spin was a little bit more difficult, because you're essentially asking customers to sign up to a service which was something that they had to convince others to use and justify the cost of. Luckily, with a bunch of different marketplace changes, including the catastrophe we've had of this sort of year, it's essentially ensured that now we have people fully understanding that they need to act. They need to act now, that they have the problem and they want a really simple solution. And then the other thing is because we've actually had already sort of built up 12,000 users on our system, we're sort of at that point where people are rippling, connecting us, talking about us, presenting our data, and so we're sort of starting to grow quite organically. And obviously the investment that the angels have made has really helped that.
Okay, well, we will be asking you more about the investment journey a little bit later on, but we'll head over now to George Hartley, who's going to tell us more about Smartermail. So over to you, George.
Sure, thanks. Hey, so I'm George from Smartermail. Smartermail is the easiest way to send your customers better email marketing. So we're an email tool specifically for e-commerce. And it was actually born out of my last company. So in 2012, I co-founded Blue Thumb, which my brother and my co-founder Phil, we grew to be Australia's largest online art marketplace. And along the way, we sort of decided we needed a retention tool, basically. And we'd been using these email tools at the time to send emails to customers about the art they were interested in, but they were just super clunky, and they used segments or they had these like weird integrations, and they didn't do what we needed, and that was actually take user data, what people had added to their cart or favorited art-wise, and send them what they'd like. Because, art's super specific, and none of the tools basically cut it. So we had to build our own, and it became our most important retention tool while we grew this, a marketplace that now does 20 million a year and is growing still off the back of some of this stuff. And it was sort of such a wow moment when it started working for us that we were like, this probably should exist for other e-commerce. It shouldn't be hard. So that's kind of how Smartermail came about. We sort of, we had this MVP or this idea. Phil and I thought it'd take a few, whack it together into a SaaS and throw it on Shopify, and it ended up taking about 18. But yeah, we eventually got it live and kicking in 2016. We raised some money from the Sydney Angels towards the end of that year into 2017. Did Startmate in their 2017 cohort, and have been growing it ever since. And I guess, our mission is to let any e-commerce store use their data to do better marketing. There are sort of 18 million e-commerce stores making sales out there, and the fact that you need to either pay thousands of dollars and lock in for a year for some enterprise system, when you should just be able to do this simply, kind of means that there's a big opportunity for us. So we've just been growing it steadily since then. It's going really well. We've got a team of 17. We're spread all over the world. We my co-founder and I have never lived in the same city, so we've just organically grown like a kind of mushroom anywhere that there's anywhere that fits. It's been a great journey so far. We're at about 1.5 million ARR. We generated 130 million in extra sales for our stores last year just through the emails, and it's just letting stores send their customers stuff that they actually are interested in. I hate spam, and I hate emails that kind of come to me when I've got no interest in what's in them. It's really intrusive. So we actually try to improve email marketing. So it's, COVID has been an amazing kind of crazy boom for us, like anyone in e-commerce. So we've sort of just been like holding on by our fingernails while we get new customers. But yeah, in general, that's my background, and that's where we're at. And yeah, it's been a fun ride so far.
Oh, thanks so much, George. I was going to ask you about COVID, but you covered that. But I will ask you, we all get a lot of emails in our, inbox every day. I mean, what are some of the ways that you have carved out a niche and retained the value proposition for your customers?
There's two facets to that. One, it's letting customers send more engaging, relevant emails. So if you get something so we let our stores send, bulk email with customized content. So they might have a list of 300,000 customers. They'll hit send and it will have different content in every email. So what that does is it actually lets their customers have a better experience because they get stuff they're interested in. So it's a virtuous cycle of better open rates, engagement, and sales. But on the other side, we knew when we were growing our e-commerce store, we had 3 of us and we didn't have time. We didn't have time to do much at all. And email would sometimes just wouldn't get done, even though it was important. And so we've actually built Smartermail. It's quite a powerful tool. It's built on like a sophisticated machine learning stack, but the actual usability of it is really key. So it's quite quick to set up. And we've, that, I guess, like easy UX focus. A big thing on that is actually speed of creating. A lot of the existing email tools have a lot of bloat and take a long time to use. And we know you don't have that time. So we built a ton of features that are really, really focused on shortening how long you actually have to use us for. Because giving small stores back their time is kind of the most value you can give them.
That's great. That's a great answer. Thanks so much, George. So over to you, David, from Bandicoot Imaging. If you could tell us a little bit about your company, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I'm Dave from Bandicoot, and I'm pretty sure that everyone out there has had various different experiences with online shopping. It can be a bit hit and miss sometimes, particularly if you're buying fashion, because sometimes what arrives in the mail wasn't exactly what you saw on the screen. So Bandicoot decided that we'd address that particular problem by creating a new type of dynamic image. It's interactive, that allows you to get a much better sense of not only the colour of a material, but actually get a feel for the texture of that material as well. So how that basically works is an online retailer who wants to sell a dress or a shirt or something that might have a bit of shine to it, they can just grab a camera, just a normal camera with a flash, and they can snap a few photos of their fabric, upload it to our servers, and then a few minutes later they can get the results back as a series of texture files which they can then display on their website. And it works really well on an iPad. If you've got an iPad, you can tilt the iPad backwards and forwards and you really get a feel for how the light's going to play across that material. So at the moment, the kind of customers that we're actually looking for are online fashion, but it also would work for textile platforms and anyone really, home and garden, anyone that really has a need or an interesting product that really doesn't translate well digitally that people would generally like to physically hold in their hands. So if there's any fashion retailers out there in the audience, give us a call. We're a little bit newer, I think, than probably the 2 other members of the panel here. We've been going for about 18 months now and we're still pre-revenue, but we're about to launch our product in the next month or so that's pretty exciting and get it out there. We've obviously been doing a lot of collaboration, a lot of trials with different people to ensure that we're actually solving the right problem, but we're about to hit the go button, so that's actually a pretty big milestone for us coming up. There's a team of 4 of us. I am extremely fortunate that I am working with, I think, probably the 3 smartest guys I know, who have really done a fantastic job of just getting this thing up and running and left me to do the talking. And we're pretty much ready to go. So that's the Bandicoot story. Okay,
that's a great story. And I know I'm one of those people that likes to touch everything when I go shopping to just see how it feels. And so that's a great solution. One of the things I was going to ask you, David, is just what do you find the reaction from the customers? I mean, what sort of objections, what sort of do you find that you get from the customers?
Yeah, well, luckily our first reaction is, wow, that actually looks really good. But as with everything, there's challenges, right? And we've got a barrier to entry, I guess, that customers are interested in. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier, is that they've actually got to take some photos of the material. And there's a bit of a formula that they need to follow. We've got instructional videos and things to help them step through that. And it takes about 5 minutes. So there's a little bit of investment from our customers to actually uptake our particular product. The other sort of major challenge, I guess, we face is pricing, because the margins are pretty thin in online fashion and it moves pretty fast, and they need something that fits into their workflow. and is priced at a point that is actually competitive to them. So we try to think about, one of the things we're trying to do is save returns. Returns in this market is huge. It's 1 in 3, and 25% of those because they actually look different. So what we want to do is save them the price of a return, and they're basically paid for our product, and that's sort of where we're anchoring that. There's a whole range of options.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great saving. Thanks so much for that, David. So now we're moving towards the part of the discussion where we're just going to learn more about the fundraising experience that the 3 founders, have had with the Sydney Angels. So I'm going to hand back over to Enrico at this point, and he's going to ask some questions, and then we'll be looking for questions from the audience attendees as well, just so that we can, give everyone as much information as possible. So I'll hand back over to Enrico.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much to all the presenters. I mean, it's been fantastic, and to think that we've been privileged enough to be able to help fund you in this journey is great. 3 very different companies as well, in 3 different stages of their, their life cycle overall. So I'm going to ask each of the founders at the moment, while we wait for any questions from the audience, is basically tell us a little bit in, not too many words, basically, how you found the founding journey, like the funding journey, sorry. In terms of seeking funding, what did you expect? How did you find it overall? So, we'll start with George basically, and see what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So our first raise was tough. It took 9 months, I think, and a lot of DD. It was a really hard slog. And I would say the reason it took so long is because we had pretty anemic numbers and growth at the time. We were not the most eminently backable company that you could describe, I think. So I think we were quite lucky that Sydney Angels took a punt on us, because I think partly because maybe we'd done Blue Thumb, so they kind of were hoping that you might be able to do something, because we'd had, I don't know, a year's worth of just chortling along with a little bit of MRR and not much change. So it was hard for us because it didn't look like a rocket ship at the time. And what we ended up doing was taking a first tranche of the money and deploying it. And we said, hey, we can double in 3 months if you give us the first bit of this money. And they were like, okay, cool. So we did that, and we did double it, and then they were like, all in. So it was a hard process, but I understand exactly why. And since then it's actually been amazing. We've sort of done an extension round, and that took about 3 emails in a few days. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. And it's actually a pretty good color, because it is, at the end of the day, it's a discussion, negotiation. As you said, you talked about due diligence, and we'll come back a little bit more to that, actually. But Carolyn, how did you find it, actually, the whole process overall?
Thanks, Enrico. I have to say, having been through the experience, I've been in my prior life from having the footprint company. I was a senior executive at a major company, and board meetings were often just completely covered in debt, equity, options. What is our strategy? And now that I understand far more completely about the costs and the benefits of each of those different pathways, you can appreciate the fact that even the raise process from the Angels was it has been a terrific experience from my perspective. It still is very time consuming and does actually have a cost. Having said that, I think that the due diligence process that we went through and the disciplines that you need to actually ensure you have, and the number of eyeballs that you have over all of your material, a bit like what George was saying, I'd like to sort of think that we were pretty well organised with some of those things, and so it's actually quite a nice thing to actually go through that DD process and have people validate either your financial model or your pitch or your product positioning, etc. So I think that's a really constructive thing to have as a smaller company. And then, I think the thing I didn't really expect was really how much time it takes away from you as the founder, because obviously, people want to touch and feel you and talk to you and all that sort of stuff. And when you're sort of trying to do all sorts of different things, sales, marketing, grow, technology, and then you're being drawn sort of away to be able to address these important questions, then I think that's probably the thing I didn't expect. And I'd certainly, if you were going to go through it again, you'd be able to say, okay, now I have to be prepared for this amount of time, and this is just what has to be done, and it's the process. But yeah, overall, it's a very productive experience, and we went into the pitch looking not just for the money, but also for the resources and the skills. So the group that we've attracted are fantastically helpful, and I think are going to be valuable to us in the long term.
Yeah, fantastic. No, thank you for that, and that's quite a good point, because I mean, the one thing, we have a bit of a tagline, and we talk a little bit about the smart money, right? And but it is basically not only the fact that there is hopefully funding that comes on board, but ideally expertise, contacts, a network perhaps, and that's obviously something that most people that want to be in an angel group, that's really what they're looking for, right? It's not just about parking the money and waiting. It's hopefully being able to contribute as well. So, David, do you want to share a little bit of your thoughts? Awesome. Go ahead. Sorry, please.
Sorry, Karen. Yeah.
Oh, I was just literally going to say, I mean, our chairperson has also come through the network, and he's an amazing guy. So if we'd not been in the network, we wouldn't have had that. So it's just another advantage that I think is something that you would say Sydney Angels definitely brings.
No, fantastic. Thank you. David?
Yeah, look, everything that the first two said, but the one thing I found that was really good about the Angels was you pretty much knew in advance what to expect and the timeline that was going to follow. So they, when we made it to the first round of pitches, we sort of got a little timeline of everything that was going to happen. There was a second pitch, there was a due diligence, there was a term sheet, there was all that sort of stuff, and it was laid out. And it followed that really quite closely. So it was kind of nice knowing there was what was coming up and that there was really no surprises. And we were raising, I think we started raising, and I'll reiterate what the other said in terms of it takes a lot longer than you expect. That was certainly a learning for us. But sort of, the COVID hit in the middle of our fundraising. So whereas we were able to sort of talk face to face with people and really get a feel for what was going on in the room, all of a sudden that shifted to Zoom, and that was a bit of a challenge. But that said, everything still went through, and probably about 4 to 5 months later we had the money. And again, I'll reiterate what Caroline said. We had a network of people now that we could touch base with and talk to, who came on our board and are observers on our board, and really bring that extra dimension and diversity of the company that we were probably lacking. So good experience all up for us.
So obviously, all of you have said that it's taken a lot longer than what you all anticipated, and you still have to manage a company, set up a company, and start up a company effectively, right? So that's always a little bit of a challenge. Thinking about the due diligence process and thinking about how you handle that, perhaps, what would you do different at the moment? Carolyn, we'll start with you.
What would I do different? I don't know whether I'd do anything. I don't know whether I'd materially change things. One thing that slowed us down a little bit was the financial due diligence and the stress testing and the need to do a cash flow model as opposed to just a financial model, and they're obviously two different things, which I know quite embarrassingly will say I didn't appreciate the difference. But having said that, by the time we got through the DD, the guys doing the DD did actually understand in a SaaS business, your cash flow model is almost the same as your financial model, because people pay at the point of sale as opposed to actually having an invoice raised and then there's a delay of 15 or 30 days or whatever. You don't get your product until you pay, so you don't have that time lag on your cash flow. So I think that's probably something that sort of eventually we got around everybody playing on the same page to be able to actually understand that process. So I think maybe that's probably the only thing that I might sort of say you'd change. But otherwise, we had all of our material already ready in the data room and had it all organised and everything in that way. I think that the pitching and just sort of really, I think the only thing that I'm probably now more aware of is the language, the nomenclature around what it is to be a tech company and a SaaS business, and the sorts of words that are expected to be attached to certain attributes of your business. And so I think that's probably something that did slow us initially, because I was sort of talking in building sector language, not tech sector language, and so I sort of think that went across. And then the other thing was also, we hit middle of COVID as well with our fundraise, so I don't know whether it really slowed us down, but it certainly was probably a complexity, because people, all of a sudden we had 3 or 4 weeks where people were having to relocate offices, and so that did actually create a little bit of a lag. But otherwise, exactly. I'm hoping that sort of, those points.
Oh, pretty good. And George, you did say that obviously in your case, the due diligence took a little bit longer, and perhaps, while this whole process was happening, maybe it allowed you to basically show better numbers, I guess, that's one thing that we as an angel group, we always want to try and get that Goldilocks just right type situation, like not too much, not too little, right? But anything in particular that you thought, from a due diligence perspective, when you go for another round, funding round now, that that you will do a little bit differently?
It's very easy when you have traction. So I feel like, it's a much easier process now. I think the one thing I probably, in retrospect, we could have done to speed it up a little bit would have been asked that question, what are you most concerned about? Or like, what's the one thing that, it might be a blocker? And kind of focus on that. And really what it turns out was, they were worried about our rate of growth, which was a legitimate concern. So if we'd kind of asked that earlier, I think we might have got quicker to okay, let's do one tranche and just see if you can do it. And that might have shaved a few months off, I'd say. But that's kind of it, It was fun. I enjoy the process, actually. I like doing sort of forecasts. They're always wrong. No one's ever done one right. You almost always undershoot. Sometimes you go over, but it's nice to say, who do we need for the next 3 years? How are we going to spend it? Like, it's actually a good thing to do with your team, whether you're raising or not. So yeah, that's sort of the one thing probably from my end.
Okay. And David, just a quick question for you. Obviously, you've raised some funding, and I know that, you've obviously raised funding from also a few other groups as well. How did that process work for you, like in terms of coordination and the like? Because presumably there's a little bit of additional due diligence or different due diligence coming through.
Yeah, you handle it carefully. Luckily, we brought the angels on first. So we treated the angels as our lead investors, and most of the due diligence came from them. And we did have some other sophisticated investors come on afterwards, but they were actually relaxed enough after having had a chat to our lead investor from the angels that they were willing to sort of follow on with what the angels made and the decisions that they thought. So the due diligence for us was pretty okay by that. And again, when it came down to sorting out subscription agreements and shareholder agreements, again, we took our lead off the angels from that, created those agreements, and luckily the rest of our investors came along for the ride. So the due diligence was pretty good, but the one thing again is the financials. I think now I go back and have a look at those financials and go, but there's none of us in our team had any real financial backgrounds. We were all technical, so that was a great learning experience for us. And the angels actually helped us through it, so it was really good.
No, that's good to hear. And I think again that goes back to the concept of saying, you're getting funding, but hopefully you're getting somebody who's also going to support, and provide some of that assistance as well, right? And make you think about it. So.
Yeah, funnily enough, I was actually in the audience for this last year watching 3 other portfolio companies talk, so it was kind of interesting. And I remember listening about them talking about the due diligence and thinking, oh my goodness, what are we getting ourselves in for? And I was really actually quite nervous. But the key thing that I found is that due diligence is not adversarial. There's no one in there actually trying to knock your company down. They're actually wanting to invest. And that was something, once I got my head around that, it was a whole new mindset. It was like, you know what, these people are working with me. They're not actually actively trying to poke holes, and if they are, it's constructively. And that's what actually made it a good process for us.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. We do have a question that's actually coming from the audience, and I'm going to ask Karen this question. And obviously, COVID, it's a big elephant in the room, I think more than we all talk about it, perhaps. Karen, how has COVID actually affected, angels in terms of the number of investments and everything else, or the whole process with the angel investors overall? Would you like to share some thoughts from our neck of the woods, please?
Sure, certainly. So I guess when COVID first emerged, it was a bit of a surprise for us all, and we were concerned about how it would affect the membership, how it would affect the founders and, the investors. So we had a couple of strategy meetings right away and, made some pretty quick changes, got everything onto Zoom for our meetings, for the members' meetings, for the DSMs. And we also contacted all the, some of the companies that we had already invested in, just to see if they needed any support. But from the number of members and from the I'll just talk about the members first. So there probably were a couple of members who are taking a break. Not many, maybe two, and it was just circumstantial. But I'd say, on the other hand, we've probably had more people have time now to be doing angel investing. So our membership has gone up a little bit because of the current environment. So that's one thing. But also with the founders and the applications from the founders, it has meant that, we were typically just taking Sydney startups because of the geography, and they were local and they were able to pitch and everything like that because everything was done, person to person. But now we are finding that more companies are applying with us from other places. We've currently in this current cycle, we've got a Victorian company that's with us, and we're finding companies from all over Australia. So there's been a couple of it's changed. I wouldn't say it's impacted us negatively at all. It's just a changed environment, and we've been very pleased with the way things have panned out, and we're going as strong as ever, I would say. Do you want to add anything to that, Enrico?
Well, I'm even though I'm in Sydney Angels, I actually live in Melbourne at the moment, so I've been locked down. But it's been, I think with the technology, it's been fantastic because I can be a part of the committee on a regular basis. I can obviously be involved in this as well. Otherwise, I would just be sitting down here missing everything. But and I think you're right, Karen. I mean, the number of applications that we are getting is still pretty high. So it's good to see that the environment is still very conducive for that. And a lot of really good ideas and a lot of really good companies coming out. So I'm pretty it is quite exciting as well. So
yeah, it's been absolutely fine. But that's a great question.
Great. Now I had a question now. So obviously you've had investors now coming in and remind me, but most of you have actually received the funding. Would it have been in the last six months, pretty much? Mm-hmm. COVID's hit, maybe hit in the middle or something like that. How are you communicating with investors, to keep them? Because obviously some of the milestones may be perhaps moving a little bit, etc. So, David, we'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, well, we're getting very good at Zoom, as you point out. I've sat in this seat for quite some time, just chatting to people, and I've probably talked, quite frankly, to more people because of this and because of that you're not travelling or anything like that. It's than I would have if, in fact, we've been trying to do this face to face. So in that aspect, I actually think it's been really good. So we've been chatting with Zoom, and of course we send out newsletters, etc., to garner a bit of feedback as well, and try to keep people up to date that way. So it hasn't, I think, really slowed us down. We've just adapted, like everyone has, to this new sort of virtual chit chat. I mean, our team hasn't seen each other for probably 7 months now. I think the last time we all saw face to face was February. The last time I saw the investors was probably the same time.
Right, exactly. And, leading into that, I mean, similar question for George, because I know you said that you and your co-founder, you haven't lived in the same city for a little while. So but I guess COVID in some respects has been quite good for Smartermail, I guess, with online shopping. And
yeah, the user rate has really gone bananas, and there's just been this massive tidal wave of e-commerce. It's like there's a great chart, I think, from Shopify that said they had 4 years planned growth happen in like 4 or 5 months. So it's just, it's just stepped 3 years into the future with e-commerce, and that's kind of reflecting on our users, and so that's good. And yeah, we're a sort of distributed team, so we've got a couple of offices in Europe and a little one here in Melbourne and Adelaide, and so that's been fine. Like we've had a bit of burnout, I think, because you can just keep working, especially if you're in Melbourne. There's nothing to do. So that's been the only negative, is a bit of a little bit of everyone sort of feeling that burnout a bit, but the business has gone really well. So we've just kept up our monthly updates with shareholders, and so that's all been fine.
Fantastic. Now my question for Carolyn. So we've talked a little bit about teams and distributed teams and everything. And Carolyn, you're kind of like the footprint company. Like when I think about it, it's you. So how do you manage that? Because you're quite obviously an engaged founder. How do you manage the concept of sole founder and I guess effectively growing the company, and how do you manage the overall growth of the company?
I guess the face of a business versus the back room of the business, or the engine room of the business, are sort of two distinct sort of things. I mean, I guess as a female solo founder, I don't know, I just went on and did it. So I definitely think that there's certain advantages in having a tech co-founder, and certainly when you look around at all the tech companies that we even just do business with, there seems to be an extraordinary number of tech startups that are brothers, 2 brothers, 3 brothers, and one's the marketing guy, one's a tech guy, and one's the CEO. So it's also just a matter of understanding the sort of the team that you actually need to have around you, and I think from the area that we're in, because we are in a marketplace that sort of never really existed then, and because it's also a very tech-heavy, technically complex area, the need of having a voice of authority with some credibility is very much an important element of just getting access to people to listen and to people to engage. So it's almost like what we term a sanitary item, which is the fact that you have an authority person who's the face of the business that can then sort of everybody, okay, there's credibility, there's authority, there's knowledge, and that's an important part of the reputation of the industry and the business. So now, our raise was about getting technical back end and also additional resources, and so that's what we've gone on to essentially do, and we've now got a tech team around us who are then hopefully the best in the business, so that that's actually freeing me up to actually create more of that brand reputation and position in the market.
Great. Thank you for that, actually. That is quite a valid point, because it is a very different business. As you said, that the authority and the expertise is something that has to obviously shine through, and that's something that the investors are going to be looking for overall. So George, we had a question from the audience. If you had to pitch your idea to Sydney Angels again for the first time, what would you do?
I don't know if we'd do much different. It's I think our pitch was okay. It's a very big addressable market, and there's a clear need for the problem. Our problem was we'd had a year's worth of being out there, not really getting much revenue. So I could have lied and said we had more revenue, or I don't know. I'm not sure if I would have changed much on that. Certainly it would have been a horrible pitch too. I really hadn't done many back then. I've done a few more since, and Startmate was a bit of a turning point a year later, doing that whole pitching to lots and lots of investors. I guess that would be the other thing. I would actually practice it properly, know what I'm doing up on stage.
Actually, I quite like that question. So, David, what would you have done differently in terms of pitching?
I'd actually probably spend a bit more time if I could dig it from somewhere to talk about the team, because really at this stage of investment, I think angel investors are really looking to the people to see if they can actually pull this off and are they going to be able to do it. We had a good talk about the team in there, but I really enjoy talking about my team. So I would ensure that I concentrate well on the team. And I think just touching a little bit even on what George said, I'd be a little bit sharper on my addressable market. I think we looked at industry size and that probably didn't really click very well. But when you talk about addressable market to people, that actually really nails the segment that you're going to be looking at. So I've learned a lot more about that.
Great. And Caroline, obviously, the Sydney Angels process, you apply, you go through a DSM or like a deal screening meeting where you do get to pitch. And then, if you get selected, you go on to the members meeting where you get to pitch again. So how did you take the feedback basically from the DSM to the members meeting? Did you have to adjust much to get that through?
Well, we had actually, I think that we had pitched before. We'd gone to a deal screening, I don't know, I think it was probably 12 months earlier or something, and didn't get through the screen at that point. And as I said before, I think one of the things that I've really learnt a lot about in the SaaS space is just the language. How do you actually frame? I mean, David said addressable market. That's sort of one of those sorts of key little nuggets of gold that you sort of learn along the way. And George was obviously alluding to a couple of other different things. So I think the difference between the first screen and the second screen we had was just having the right sort of language around exactly the same business proposition, which made all the difference in terms of the screen acceptance of exactly what we were doing. And then going on to the actual meeting itself, I don't know, at the end of the day, I think we further refined the slides, but ultimately I feel it was just really trying to make a couple of key points about the scale of the opportunity. And actually, I just gave a couple of really key practical points of how our technology applies to real-world projects, including the Atlassian project that everybody in the whole world is talking about at the moment down in Sydney, and how our software had assisted 2 of the 3 bid teams through that process. And so I guess that maybe helped everybody sort of click with okay, now we can understand exactly what this is all about, given that embodied carbon is this, notoriously black box thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think also going to George's point, you pitch, and eventually each little one you're learning something more, getting more refined, getting punchier, and getting greater clarity. I mean, I do quite a lot of public speaking, but I guess when you're speaking about how to raise money for your own business, it's an art in its own right.
It's a bit different, yeah. And I think, as you said, I mean, every industry has its own jargon and everything like that. So it's being able to find what's going to resonate with somebody else, and obviously that makes sense as well. So, but obviously, as you said, you pitched before and you applied before, and I think perseverance is something that it's good to see that you applied again, because now we had the benefit of actually investing with you, which is fantastic. So I mean, all of you are founders, so all of you persevere, which is great. So now we got about a 1-minute warning before this is over, actually. So I don't know if there are any more questions from the audience.
Well, while we're waiting for those, maybe I'll say that if you did want to apply to be a founder, you can do that in writing on the Sydney Angels website through Gust. And if you're thinking of joining the Sydney Angels as a member, as an investor, do get in touch with us through the website as well. And I'd like to thank Caroline from the Footprint Company, George from Smartermail, and David from Bandicoot Imaging. It was really great that you shared the journey that you had with the Sydney Angels. And thanks, Enrico, for joining us here as well. I think we've got about 20 seconds, so I don't know if anyone has a nugget they want to add to this, or you have another question, Enrico.
No, I just want to thank everybody as well for allowing me to participate on this again, and obviously from Melbourne, not Zoom, but something similar to that. So no, it's been great, and thank you very much also for applying to Sydney Angels. And as I said, we're very pleased to have been able to do something with you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.